Welcome to Tonight in America. I'm your host, Dontarius Jones. We have an exciting episode of Tonight in America that I'm recording for you guys that's going to be released today on November 1st. Happy post Halloween, everyone. I didn't shoot this on Halloween because it's Halloween. I wanted to have a day off to sleep and stuff. So I'm real rested. I'm up. I'm shooting a video early. It's going to release tonight, the same day that I'm shooting the video. So today we are talking about the rise in political violence and what is really going on in this landscape. It's a very slow news week, so it's nothing really of substance to cover. Now, I've been meaning to cover the Israeli stuff. Um, I'm gonna react to Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes' interview that was released a couple of days ago. I'm gonna react to that, and I'm gonna drop that on Sunday for you guys. I'm also gonna get a post debate between Dave Smith and Steph Dillon of the Babylon Bee. I'm gonna also react to that too as well, and try to get that released tomorrow. But as you can see, it's normally like casual for me to not wear my suit on Saturday and while I'm doing streams or whatever. But I mean, hey, for old time's sakes, I'm gonna do this in since it's a recording of a video. I'm just gonna. It's been a while since I wore my suit too, so I'm busting it out for a pre-recording video. So, like I said, we are talking all about the rise in political violence that's been going on a lot in this new political landscape, where it seems to be that political violence is getting more and more and more rampant. And as you may know, it comes from both sides, as they always say, from the right, from the left. But it's very kind of like it's kind of hard to really judge right wing violence because most times, and you're gonna see right now in the video that I have for you guys today how groups like the ADL, the Anti Defamation League, has how they're able to judge and pull from stuff that's labeled right wing extremism or white supremacy. How are they able to better? How they're able to pull this data, as you could say, and like what is their source from this supposed extreme right wing supremacy, um, from how they're able to collect how they're able where they're collecting a lot of this data from. That's what I should say. So and what sources are they pulling this from? Because like they had a right around the killing of Charlie Kirk, they released one of their annual data collection where they say that white supremacy, right wing extremism is still very high compared to all the other forms of political violence, including left wing political violence. And as you can see, the leader of American Renaissance, Jared Taylor, did a follow up video to basically debunk a lot of the ADL's claims of what they constitute as right wing white supremacist extremism. It's a great detailed video from Jared Taylor. But we also gonna go over the history of like political violence from like figures like you know, John F. Kennedy, R.F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, you know, President Ronald Reagan, who had his life attempted on. He survived, of course, and of course, Martin Luther King. A lot of other political figures all over. Fidel Castro, who actually had his life threatened too as well by the CIA. We're gonna watch a little documentary that I found that goes over the history of political violence, political assassination. And then the most recent ones we had, like down the most recent ones I could think of, President Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, the attempted assassination on Nick Fuentes' life, and the killing of United Healthcare CEO by Luigi Mangione, which, in my opinion, was the starting point in assassin culture. Like I said, the numbers have increased over time about assassin culture. Like we've pretty much live in a time right now where this type of behavior is encouraged more and more from the left. As far as they say that political violence from the right is a big problem, they say like, oh, from Charlottesville, from January 6th, you know. But we have to look at one thing for sure is no one really got hurt from January 6th of to a degree, like say a BLM riot, or any of these school shootings from these types, these tranny types, whatever. You know, the January 6th compared to BLM is not even night and day, because you look at all the damages and people that got hurt and killed on the BLM riots compared to January 6th, it's not even close. Even in Charlottesville, which has been so many inconsistencies about that story about what happened in Charlottesville. They say that the Proud Boys, a white supremacist group, even though their leader is in Enrique Torrio, who's a Spanish guy. I forgot what Enrique Torrio's ethnicity is, but I know for sure he's Spanish. I think he's like Mexican or something like that. But you look at guys like that who, and then they're labeled a hate white supremacist group, even though their leader is Mexican. Again, I don't know his ethnicity, but you look at that and they say that that was a form of domestic terrorism, whatever, and Antifa was there to stop them from committing worse acts of violence against counter protesters. But in reality, Antifa was there to start problems with the Charlottesville protesters. So there's been a lot of confusion about that over the years, and people have never really given much. People have tried to give the clarifications, especially in big medias, but they're not allowed their voices onto these big media platforms. They're basically ostracized. And then you got groups like, you got people from Fox News that make up excuses and says that, yeah, we didn't really condone in Charlottesville from those white supremacists. We condemned them, even though instead of giving them a platform to speak on and to clarify their positions and say that Charlottesville was a big lie orchestrated by the left wing media to go out there and paint all the protesters as extremist, hateful people, even though in reality they were not. So we're gonna dive right on into all the stuff that I have for you guys today. We're gonna start off with well, let's start off with this right here because this is important as to why I'm making this video. So comes from the CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies, and it's titled "Left Wing Terrorism and Political Violence in the United States: What the Data Tells Us." So I'm gonna read through some of it, but it mostly just goes over how the left how the landscape of political violence has changed over the years, basically. And now left wing extremism has pretty much taken taken the forefront over right wing extremism, even though right wing extremism is pretty much like over exaggerated. And that's according, like I said, that's according to groups like the ADL, the SPLC, Right Wing Watch, who fabricate a lot of their data and use instances of like, what, I'm not gonna get away. I'm not gonna get ahead of myself. I'll show you the video of how they're able to collect their data and how they're able to label right wing extremism crimes, and how they're able to put that and manipulate it basically and put it into the data to add to right wing extremism to make it seem like it's as worse as left wing extremism. But in reality, they're just manipulating the data to better fit their narratives more. So, as this goes on right now, the tragic killing of political commentator and conservative activist Charlie Kirk has once again put the spotlight on political violence in the United States, with figures on both sides of the political aisle decrying extremism on the other. To understand the danger of political violence today and to find the best solution for reducing it, it is important to understand the overall threat landscape and how both left and right wing violence have evolved and could change in the future. Our analysis of terrorism trends in the United States shows that indeed left wing violence has risen in the last 10 years, particularly since President Donald Trump's rise to political prominence in 2016. Although it has risen from very low levels and remains much lower than historical levels of violence carried out by right wing and jihadist attackers. I always thought, I have to say this about jihadist attacks. They're considering that their own category. But if you have to look at like most, Middle Easterns that come here, for the most part, not all of them agree with right wing ideology, especially when they're coming from the Middle East. And if you look at most of these attacks, if you were to constitute them and put them in like a right or a left category, I would pretty much consider like Middle Eastern attacks would be a left leaning category if we have to constitute them as that as such. But it is fair to give them their own category because they are a separate category altogether. And most of these attacks, like the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers, none of them were American. None of them were for this country. So, but a lot of the stuff that they group as right wing um, terrorism attacks, especially in this article right here, they would say like incels, basically, like incel types of like say school shootings or whatever. They would constitute that as right leaning attacks, even though the said incel in question probably doesn't even lean right at all, probably a social outcast, but yet they group them as a right leaning crime, and that's how they're able to that's how they're able to increase to better serve the purpose that right wing extremism is very rampant and very bad. Even though most of these crimes that happen and they're labeled like say something to do with misogyny, like I just mentioned, like with an incel related like violent crime, the person could be very much a left leaning incel, but they're still grouping him as right because it says his violent act of crime is against say a school per se. He attacking a school because of like I don't know. I'll give an example. I'll just throw an example out there. Say like he's attacking like because he got rejected by a woman or whatever, or he has deep hatred for women at his school, and so he wants to go attack the school. They would consider that a right leaning crime. I don't and believe me. I don't understand how you can group that as a right leaning crime. But that's exactly what this article alleges that those are the types of crimes that is put into the category of right wing extremism. So as it goes on right now, more contentious politics in the United States and the expansion of "Make America Great Again" MAGA movement appear to have re-engenderized violent left-wing extremism. The left-wing movement as a whole has not returned to its violent heights of the 1960s and 1970s, but the number of terrorist incidents involving left-wing extremists so far this year puts 2025 on pace to be the left's most violent year in more than 3 decades. Moreover, 2025 marks the first time in more than 30 years that left wing attacks outnumber those from the far right. So let's go down to the part right here. I want to see where. Okay, so I think this is it right here. The data set includes information such as incident dates, location, target. So I'm reading this part right here because this is how where they group like certain types of crimes into certain categories, how they're able to branch off certain crimes and how to put them in like the right or the left. So the data set includes information such as incident date, location, target, and location type, weapon used, and victim fatalities, as well as perpetrator age, sex, ideology, group affiliation, and current or former affiliation with the military or law enforcement. All full methodology and code book for the data set is available at csis.org. Okay, so this belief defines left wing terrorism as that which is motivated by in opposition to capitalism, imperialism, or colonialism, black nationalism, support for LGBTQ plus rights, support for environmental causes or animal rights, adherence to pro communist, pro socialist beliefs or anti fascist rhetoric, opposition to government authority under the belief it is a tool of oppression responsible for social injustices, support for decentralized political and social systems, which such as anarchism, partisan extremism, where violence is justified against political opponents and parties perceived as advancing right wing agendas. Right wing terrorism is used in this analysis includes incidents motivated by ideas of racial or ethnicity supremacy. If anything, okay, so okay, so black nationalism is a left leaning crime. So if they're gonna go with that racial ethnicity supremacy, I don't. So how is that not grouped as left leaning also? Because that seems like to me that should be also grouped, because if you're grouping black nationalism in left-leaning crimes, but you're grouping racial ethnicity supremacy, wouldn't black nationalism also count as racial supremacy too as well? Because most of these black nationalists that commit these crimes before in the past have a form of supremacy ideology as well. So would it make sense to also group them in the same category as maybe left-leaning category? But I digressed. So as it goes on, opposition to government authority, believing it is a tyrannical and illegitimate, misogyny, including incels. See, that right there is what I mentioned earlier about the incel part. So if say the incel could be left leaning, would you mean to tell me that even if he's a left leaning incel, but the crime constitutes it still would constitute as a right leaning crime? So that's what makes this data kind of like ambiguous. So like to understand exactly. So like if he's a left leaning incel, it would still constitute as right leaning crime because he's an incel, and it's considered like say if the crimes against a woman is a misogynist thing. Say if the guy's a very hard far leftist incel who just wants to bag a chick, but he's mad he got socially rejected and just decides to kill the chick because he's an incel and the crime was against a woman. He's still considered right wing. It doesn't make any sense. Hatred based on sexuality or gender identity, where there's a lot of crimes against men. Well, okay, so for example, say if a woman kills a man based off of misandry, okay, would that constitute as a right leaning crime, or was that constitute as a left leaning crime? So hatred based off of sexuality on gender identity. Well, I'm guessing this only consider is only like one gender exclusive for me personally speaking. This is probably considered to men, i.e., probably white men, probably black conservatives, whatever. This will only be constituted to one sex, and it will probably consider right. So, say if a woman kills a man, I mean, what is that? Is that holding the same standard? It's very ambiguous how they're writing this stuff. Opposition to abortion, uh, of course, or partisan extremism, where violence is justified against political opponents, parties perceived as advancing left wing agendas. Well, yeah, I'll agree on that because those last two, it's similar to the last, it's similar to the left, of course, because they said the same thing like advancing right wing agendas. That one's considered. So yeah, I could those last two, no argument from me. But some of this stuff is kind of like hard to really to really lock down and say you can constitute that as like right wing types of terrorism. The incel, like I just mentioned earlier, because like say if the guy's a far left, he's a far left incel, and he just kills a woman because if she rejects him, you really gonna count that as a right wing type of crime? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me because he could be a far leftist who so he's damn sure supports the Dems. He supports Barack Obama, supports Hillary Clinton, supports Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, all these types of figures. Supports Bernie Sanders. He's a socialist incel. But you're telling me, say if he commits an act of a crime, it will constitute that as a right wing crime when this guy has been like a lifelong Democrat? So and then, like I said, the tyrannical and, and illegitimate types of like government extreme, right wing extremism. There's left leaning extremism that happens a lot as Antifa types that like are anti government. So they say they're like they're anti fascist, but right now you have these Antifa types that are going out here that are assaulting people every day that are pro Trump or whatever. They show up to these to have these protests, and then they're destroying shit, destroying government properties, looting stores, going into stores. They're committing very, very violent acts of political violence, especially most recently on Charlie Kirk, who was gunned down by a kid who uh, was definitely not a Republican. His family, of course, hardcore Republicans, sure, very conservative and Christian oriented, but he's not. He was dating a tranny. He was very left leaning, according to his own family, who said he drifted away on the left. And then he took a shot. Of course, like again, we don't really have full details yet, so I still believe he's the shooter until more details come out. My opinion will change, But we need more details. We need more transparency from the FBI. But again, that's an example of left wing terrorism. And then of course, Donald Trump, life's been as Crooks, I believe, or what was the guy's name? Crooks, I believe, the one that took a shot at him. That almost took his life. And then the other one, Roof, who he also tried to take his own life in court recently. But all left leaning acts of terrorism. So this article's not doing no justice to better describe exactly how is it that you can constitute some of these acts as like just right-leaning acts, because like you look at the racial and ethnic supremacy types of right-wing crimes where they got black nationalism in the left-leaning crimes. Wouldn't that count also to racial ethnic supremacy too? That seems like it would count towards as well. So this is what's so confusing about some of this data that's being collected that's being collected by these study groups. Some of this data that they're collecting is just like, it's very ambiguous to really constitute as like left or right, because you look at this, like I said, like the contradiction between the black nationalism and fucking racial and ethnic supremacy. That would also constitute to that as well. Black nationalism would be considered racial supremacy as well in that same category, if we're going to be 100% honest. Is this just for whites that they're only right leaning, and then black nationalism crimes, related crimes like the black Israelites who assault people, that will be considered left? It doesn't make a lot. If I argue, in my estimation, then you should probably count them both in the same category and then put them in both either just left or right. But it seems like to me they're being ambiguous with this on purpose, just to confuse people that look into this data and come to a realization that what is really like right leaning violence and left leaning violence. Because it seemed like to me over time, and like especially in this video that I'm going to show y'all, that goes over and debunks a lot of the ADL's data collection, and it shows you like what they constitute as like white supremacy types of crimes. So we're gonna watch this 45. We're probably not gonna watch all of it. It's gonna go over what political assassination over the years, and like how it's changed over time, and just shows you all the different political assassinations that's happened in history.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence, or any violence for that matter.
The central premise of the Biden campaign is that Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs.
That rhetoric all the time, calling people Nazis, authoritarians, fascists, that's the type of rhetoric that is pushing violence. That's who push violence. You know, Trump enforcing the laws doesn't push violence, but I mean, it's these liberals that are so cucked to the system. It's because of immigration enforcement, not realizing how to understand what is immigration law and how it's implemented. Donald Trump is the first one in history to basically do immigration law and do it the right way. Like, you know, ICE agents going into workplaces and picking up illegals that are working at jobs where they should not be having jobs at, and picking them up and arresting them and shipping them off to be deported back to whatever country they came from. That's exactly how you do immigration. But a lot of these leftists, and even some people on the right, are against it and say it's unconstitutional to do that, but not realizing that immigration law, that's how you do immigration. It's not against the law to do that way. It's just people don't understand what real immigration enforcement looks like, and now we actually do see what it really looks like. And I'm like, I'm all for it, but like you got a lot of these people that are like so cucked into thinking that like soft core immigration, like what Obama did, where he was just turning people away from the border, and that's how he was able to get those inflated numbers of like he had more deportations than Trump did in his first week in office.
That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination.
Hey, he's a beast, and he's ready to fight for this nation. He's ready to fight for us, and he's in it to win it.
An assassination attempt is contrary to everything we stand for as a nation, everything.
In the shadows of power, where decisions shape nations and destinies, there lies a dark, sinister force, a force that silences dissent, eliminates opposition, and alters the course of history with the pull of a trigger or the thrust of a blade. What happens to the world when a notorious figure is assassinated? And what happens when they survive?
There's no doubt about the fact that we are a horribly divided nation right now politically.
The Butler Farm showground doesn't have the look of a place which shapes history, but what happened beneath the flag of this nation could define this nation's future.
The attempt on Donald Trump's life on July 13th at the Pennsylvania rally is a stark reminder of the risks involved with representing an ideology to the masses.
Take a look at what happened.
The attack was carried out by 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, who was perched on a roof around 130.
Yeah, it was Crooks, Thomas Matthew Crooks. It's the kid right here that tried to take Trump's life and stuff. And you look at this kid right now, I mean, they don't count. And the thing about it is the ADL doesn't count his shooting of Trump in their data because they don't already have a full understanding of what his political ideology is. But if you could kind of tell this kid looks like a leftist. This kid looks very much like a leftist. You cannot tell me this kid's a right wing or whatever. This kid shot at Donald Trump, and then I think it was revealed that this kid was like a major gooner. He has subscription to like some OnlyFans, a very major spender in like the OnlyFans content side of the internet. So it's very much clear this guy's not no right. He's not no Republican. He's not no conservative. He's not a. It's kind of clear what this kid is. He's a leftist. You just look at him. He looks like one of those guys that'll be attending a gay pride parade.
5 meters away. He shot multiple times with an AR rifle, hitting Trump in the ear. 2 people were injured in the attack, and Corey Comparatore, a 50-year-old fire chief, was killed trying to protect his family.
So hearing this is a little jarring, especially with them saying they found explosives in his car. That being a block away is quite terrifying.
It's hard to think that someone that grew up and graduated from the school that I go to now could do something like this, and not only that, live across the street from me.
Where Crooks grew up, neighbors are trying to reconcile the quiet boy who would wave but not speak with a would-be killer.
With this assassination attempt, I feel like it's going to swing everything in his way.
I think this is probably going to fire up a lot of people that support him, who were already pretty fired up.
You know, his head is turned. Pop, 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 pop.
It threatens to deepen the rift across this country. Already the events here are the subject of wild conspiracy theories.
The motivations behind political assassinations are diverse and complex, reflecting the intricate web of power.
We still don't even really know 100% about Thomas Crooks. We still don't have any transparency from the FBI about him. And that's really on the FBI's fault for not really giving more transparency about Thomas Crooks than what we already know. We know very, very small, probably not even close to 50% of what we really need to know about this kid's life and his history. And what was his motivation in really going to kill Trump? We don't really have the full details and scope of that. We just have like this, probably I'd say about 20% of stuff to go off on about the kid. That's it. They're not being full transparency about him because he's dead. So.
Ideology, revenge, state interests, economic concerns, social factors, and personal psychology.
President Trump is making not just a comeback, but a reassessment of the world and the things that have happened to him.
The stakes are too high. The stakes are too high.
Each assassination carries its own unique context and consequences, often reshaping the course of history in unpredictable ways. By understanding these motivations, we gain deeper insights into the dark undercurrents of political life and the profound impact of these violent acts on the world stage.
Nobody should have to go through that. And so until he put his fist up, and even after, I was so concerned because you just didn't know what was going on. So yeah, that was very heart-wrenching for America. I remember my mom going through the assassination of JFK, and I just don't think it's something that nobody should experience.
Down on the ground, shot in the ear. Many people at the rally said while we were leaving, Donald Trump won the election.
Yeah, he did.
Every assassination has left its mark in history. One way or another, in every corner of the world, the greatest decisions have always had something in common. They are nearly always surrounded by death. In 2007, former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, was assassinated during a political rally in Rawalpindi. A 15-year-old suicide bomber named Bilal plunged Pakistan into a state of turmoil and had lasting effects on its political landscape.
Extremists and militants feared that Pakistan would no longer be a safe haven for them, and they tried to prevent my party coming to power, prevent me from coming to power with this attack.
Long live Bhutto, her supporters shouted today. Bhutto is alive. Her killer must pay the price for her blood. It will fuel the anger of protesters, both here at the scene of the crime and around the country, who feel that they've been lied to by the government, that there's been a deliberate cover-up of what amounts to a massive security failure to protect this country's best-known politician.
President on his way to honor the man he calls a martyr for peace. With him, former Presidents Bush and Carter, and almost the entire political establishment of America.
In 1995, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by Yigal Amir.
And this was during negotiations to bring full peace between Israel and Palestine. Yitzhak Rabin, they agreed to, I believe it was called the Oslo Accords. That was their first step towards peace between Israel and Palestine. Hopefully leading to like full sovereignty for the Palestinians. But of course, he got assassinated. And it was implied that he was killed, according to his wife, by someone in the Luckert party. And as you know, one of the members in the Luckert party was Benjamin Netanyahu. That's who Rabin's wife was implying who killed him, was Benjamin Netanyahu.
An Israeli ultranationalist. His death dealt a severe blow to the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, a conflict which continues to escalate in violence to this day. Every cruel, radical decision has a long-lasting impact.
For me, peace is first the readiness of the Arab leaders to reconcile, and I stress to reconcile, with the existence of Israel, because the essence of peace is reconciliation with the existence of one of the other one.
It's been an extraordinary day for the Palestinians of Gaza City, but it is still not clear if the peace process has really advanced.
The Prime Minister went to Brighton Police Station to tell newsmen about her own escape. She was awake and had just completed work on her conference speech when the bomb went off.
The assassination attempt on Margaret Thatcher occurred when the Provisional Irish Republican Army bombed the Grand Hotel in Brighton, England. Thatcher was staying at the hotel for the Conservative Party conference. The primary motivation for the IRA's attempt to assassinate Margaret Thatcher was the ongoing conflict in Northern Ireland, known as the Troubles.
Today, for the first time in 2 decades, soldiers walked the streets of West Belfast with no need to fear the IRA. They're not going home yet and may not for a long time, but it still must be hard to believe.
This conflict was marked by violent clashes between those who wanted Northern Ireland to remain part of the United Kingdom. Thatcher, as the British Prime Minister, was seen as a key symbol of British authority and resistance to the IRA's objectives. The assassination attempt, while failing to kill Thatcher, had significant repercussions. It highlighted the ongoing severity of the conflict.
Yeah, this one was crazy. Someone tried to bomb her in a hotel suite. It backfired, of course, because Margaret Thatcher managed to escape being killed. You know, this one was like this was really a close call right here, like a bomb. It's not every day. Like you see stuff like this that happens in movies where someone manages to escape being bombed and killed, especially in the hotel rooms. So Margaret was able to survive this literally by the miracle of God.
Conflict in Northern Ireland and the lengths to which the IRA was willing to go to achieve their objectives.
My husband was in bed and all the windows went and the bathroom was extremely badly damaged. Yes, we were very lucky. You hear about these atrocities, these bombs. You don't expect them to happen to you. But life must go on as usual. And your comfort will go on.
Thatcher's survival and subsequent response, reaffirming her resolve against terrorism, also reinforced her image as the Iron Lady. Resilience is a common theme, whilst not everyone will side with.
I'm gonna take my face off the screen for a minute. Let this keep playing. Let me turn my light on right quick. Hold on, let me fix this. I'm not gonna edit it out. I'm just gonna leave this in because I'm taking my face off the screen for a minute.
An individual, it takes a radical mindset to attempt to kill the embodiment of a philosophy.
This government will not weaken. This nation will meet that challenge. Democracy will prevail.
Last evening, and it was really great fun. It was nice to see Henry Cato there, too.
Just to recap then, there has been an assassination attempt on President Reagan.
But if history teaches anything, it teaches that simple-minded appeasement or wishful thinking about our adversaries is folly. It means the betrayal of our past, the squandering of our freedom. So I urge you to speak out against those who would place the United States in a position of military and moral.
I spoke about Ronald Reagan earlier too. He was one of the ones that in history has dealt with assassination. It's very Yeah, his one was crazy. It was believe it was a guy that was obsessed with this movie star, trying to take a shot at Ronald Reagan. Ronald managed to live, of course. He got shot in the arm, right? He got shot right here in the shoulder area. It was that one was really crazy. I saw it, actually, funny story. I saw it on like the episode of American Dad back in the day when I used to watch it. This one was right here was parodied in an American Dad episode because the main character is Stan Marsh, I believe. He's a big Ronald Reagan fan in the show. He loved Ronald Reagan, so they recreated this one in one of the episodes of the show, and that's how I was able to know about this since I was like little. This episode came out years ago, but yeah, that's how I was able to know Ronald Reagan was also one of the ones that was targeted in assassination. Of course, he managed to live, thank God. So, but yeah, this one was crazy.
Inferiority.
John Hinckley Jr. waited outside the Washington Hilton Hotel, where President Reagan was delivering a speech. As Reagan exited the hotel, Hinckley fired 6 shots, wounding the president, Press Secretary James Brady, Secret Service
Yeah, John Hinckley, that's his name.
Agent Tim McCarthy, and police officer Thomas Delahanty.
The president has been hit. He has a wound, we believe, in his upper shoulder. His condition, according to the White House, is stable. We do not believe that the president's life is in any danger. His assailant is in custody, or his suspected assailant is in custody. For news on that assailant and for news of any possible motive, we're still waiting. This is Norman Reese, News at 10 in Washington.
Reagan was hit by a ricochet bullet that lodged near his heart, but he survived the attack after prompt medical intervention. The motivations behind this attempt were markedly different from many political assassinations, as they were not rooted in political ideology or conflict.
How high is the price of freedom, but also how much it is worth, that price.
Instead, the attempt was driven by the personal and psychological issues of the assailant. The primary motivation behind Hinckley's attempt to assassinate President Ronald Reagan was his obsession with actress Jodie Foster.
I had the delusion back in 1981 that by shooting the president I could impress Jodie Foster, which me saying that now it's ridiculous, but that's what I believed back then. It was in ways like a suicide attempt, just saying this is it, this is the end of my life.
Did you have any knowledge then that those letters were forwarded to the FBI? When was the first time you knew the FBI was involved in an investigation of the Hinckley murders? The first time I knew that the FBI was involved was when somebody...
Yeah, it was Jodie Foster. Yeah, that's her name. That was Jodie Foster. Like I said, I'm not a really big fan of Jodie Foster. I think I watched one movie I believe she was in. Forgive me, I forgot the movie that she starred in. I don't really watch much TV, like talking about forever. When I turn on TV here or there, it's usually for background noise, and I'm on my phone or I'm on the computer, and like I have it like literally on the background in the back while I'm reading articles on the computer, getting ready for another show.
Called me up and said, please come over and talk to the FBI. That was also at the same moment, I think maybe 10 minutes later, when I heard about the whole Reagan deal. I didn't know anything about it until that point.
Hinckley began to stalk Foster, enrolling in a writing course at Yale University, where she was a student, and repeatedly tried to contact her. When his attempts to win her attention and affection failed, Hinckley conceived the idea of assassinating the President of the United States to impress her, believing that such a dramatic act would capture her attention and demonstrate his worthiness.
That's crazy.
Propaganda efforts can control the flow of information, highlighting certain...
Imagine that you're going to win a woman's heart by assassinating the President of the United States, while you spend the rest of your life behind bars, doing life sentences, or possibly get sentenced to death. So, I genuinely cannot comprehend some of these guys' thoughts to do anything to try to get pussy. That's the dangerous thing about simp culture, which has been around for a long time. Even back then, as you can see right now in this documentary, that this guy was driven by vagina to go and kill the President of the United States. Insane.
Details while downplaying or ignoring others to shape public perception. State-controlled media often play a pivotal role in this aspect.
The x-ray was taken at 7 o'clock this morning. The results were apparently red, and it was known at least a couple of hours ago that the president would be getting out. Dr. O'Leary warned that he might look a little bit thinner, and here he comes now, dressed in a red sweater. And he's coming out the front door with his daughter, Patty Davis, and Mrs. Reagan on his arm, both dressed in red. What are you going to do when you get home, Mr. President? What are you going to do when you get home?
Sit down.
After 12 days, the president back here at the White House. He, of course, was expected to be here 12 days ago at about 2:30 in the afternoon. That's when the assassin's bullet rang out, and of course the president then was taken immediately to George Washington Hospital.
Reagan's survival and recovery boosted his popularity and had significant implications for his presidency and public perception.
Parallel to Trump. It means parallel to Trump. Many people, I heard some people say that yeah, Trump almost being killed was similar to Ronald Reagan's life being threatened in the same fashion. It's insane to me how two similar instances happened to two presidents. I mean, I like Ronald Reagan. I like Ronald. I mean, he was definitely controlled by that foreign lobby that controls our politics, of course. But I like Ronald Reagan. He wasn't that bad of a guy, quite frankly. He seemed like to me he was a president that was loved by many, and also, I mean, many people criticize a guy because he comes from many people my age group don't notice, but Ronald Reagan was an actor in Hollywood. He was a former guy in Hollywood that came from that world to go on to become president of the United States, similar to Trump in some ways. But the difference between Reagan and Trump is that Reagan actually has politics experience. Trump didn't when he got into politics. So that's the key difference.
We all made then is still true, and we're going to keep that pledge, and that is to have a government that will be of the people of California. Partisanship ends as of today.
Reagan's secretary, James Brady, and his wife, Sarah, became leading advocates for gun control. Their efforts, culminating in the Brady Bill, left a lasting legacy in the fight for more stringent gun laws in the United States.
As the next requirement for a program for peace, I would assign a high priority to strategic arms reduction.
Under normal circumstances, President Ford could be expected to carry this state very easily. This is Michigan, and this is his home state. But these are not quite normal times because Mr. Reagan is doing very well. So President Ford is having to fight for every vote that he can get here.
There were 2 assassination attempts on President Gerald Ford in 1975, both within the span of less than 3 weeks.
I now solemnly reaffirm my promise I made to you last December 6th to uphold the Constitution, to do what is right as God gives me to see the right, and to do the very best I can for America.
Lynette Fromm, a devoted follower of Charles Manson and a member of the Manson family, approached President Ford with a .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol as he was walking towards the California State Capitol to meet with Governor Jerry Brown.
He saw the hand of a woman come up between two people in the crowd, and she was pushing her way through the crowd.
And just about that time, there was another person, a redheaded woman, moved toward him. I couldn't see what she was doing, but all at once the president made a motion like this, as if he'd been punched or pinched or something.
Agent Bundorf reached and grabbed the gun with his right hand, grabbed her arm with his left hand, forced her arm down, and twisted the gun out of her hand, and he took possession of the gun.
Lynette's attempt on the president's life was due to Manson's influence. His helter-skelter ideals opposed world leaders. This, alongside Lynette's passion for environmental concerns, led her to attempt the violent deed.
You've got it stuck in your brain that I murdered somebody. What do you want to call me a murderer for? I've never killed anyone. I don't need to kill anyone. I think it. I have it here. You know, if I wanted to kill somebody, I'd take this book and beat you to death with it, and I wouldn't feel a thing. It'd be just...
Charles Manson. A person that will go down in history as being very, very controversial. I'll say that. Very controversial about Charles Manson. So many books, so many documentaries about his cult. So many people try to get into that brain of Charles Manson, yet people still can't decipher what goes through Charles Manson's brain. Quite frankly, the guy was a very polarizing figure. I'll say that, but it's alleged that he's a byproduct of the CIA. That's for sure.
Like walking to the drugstore.
Do you feel blame? Are you mad? Do you feel like wolves about rough get
Same thing with the Unabomber too as well. Ted Kaczynski was a byproduct of a CIA backed behavioral program that went wrong. Pretty much that drove Ted Kaczynski insane, and pretty much what led to the creation of the Unabomber. So there's a lot of these cases where you see a lot of these crazy individuals that grow on to be like these cult-like domestic terroristic figures. They tend to always be some form of CIA involvement somewhere in the process.
The second assassination attempt on Ford's life was carried out by Sarah Jane Moore, a political radical and former FBI informant. Sarah stood among a crowd outside the St. Francis Hotel, where President Ford was leaving after a meeting. Moore fired a single shot from a .38 caliber revolver at Ford from about 40 feet away, but missed him due to a heroic bystander, Oliver Sipple, who intervened by grabbing her arm as she fired.
What drove you to want to try to assassinate President Ford?
Well, everybody asks that, and the thing is that everybody was talking about it. They say, where did you get the idea? I don't know about the rest of the country, but in San Francisco, people were saying this all the time. Number one, we elect our presidents, we don't appoint them. And Gerald Ford was appointed, and he was appointed by a crook, if you will pardon the expression.
Moore was motivated by radical political beliefs. She later claimed she had been driven by a desire to make a political statement and had become disillusioned with the U.S. government. The attempts on Ford's life
That would be considered a left-leaning crime right there.
led to an outpouring of public support for the president and increased his visibility and interactions with the public, albeit under tighter security.
The group of pens is reserved for the Kennedys, and the Attorney General is entrusted with a half dozen.
Robert F. Kennedy was campaigning for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States in 1968. He had just won.
Now, this one right here, I'm going to explain it after they go over who shot Robert Kennedy. I'm going to explain to you that the person that shot him in the video is not the person that shot Robert Kennedy at all. Matter of fact, hold on. What I might do is I'm going to pull it up on my side. And I'm going to pull up the video and show you guys exactly who shot Robert Kennedy.
The California primary, a significant victory that bolstered his chances of securing the nomination.
I do not run for the presidency merely to oppose any man, but to oppose new policies. I run because I am convinced that this country is on a perilous course, and because I have such strong feelings about what must be done, I feel that I'm obliged to do all that I can.
Kennedy was at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California. After delivering a victory speech in the hotel's embassy ballroom, he planned to leave the hotel through the kitchen pantry area to avoid the crowds. Sirhan Bashara Sirhan, a 24-year-old Palestinian Arab, was waiting in the kitchen pantry area. As Kennedy walked through, Sirhan stepped forward and fired a .22 caliber revolver. Kennedy was shot multiple times. The fatal bullet entered behind his right ear, passed through his brain, and exited near the back of his skull.
All right, so let's correct that right quick. So as you can see right here, I have the video. RFK goes over exactly who shot his father, and it was not Sirhan. So for the purpose of this video, I want to get everything right quick. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it.
It became clear to me, as it would to anybody who read that report, that Sirhan could not have killed my father, which is what Thomas Noguchi, the coroner, the most important coroner probably in American history, concluded also and said in his autobiography. And here's what happened, the short story. Sirhan fired 2 shots at my father. He was 5 feet away. There was, as I said, there was absolute mayhem in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel. My father just won the primary. He said from the stage, and now it's on to Chicago, which was where the convention was. Then he walks off the stage and he went into a route that was not expected. He was led into a route through the kitchen, which he was not supposed to go to. And waiting in the kitchen in an ambush was Sirhan standing in front of a steam table. And as my father approached the steam table, Sirhan fired at him 2 shots. One of those hit Paul Schrade. The other one went past my father's ear and hit a door jamb behind my father, a wooden door jamb from which it was later removed by the LAPD. Sirhan was then grabbed by 6 men in a dog pile, and he was backed onto the steam table. And his hand, Rayford Johnson, who was a great friend of mine, one of my father's close friends, he was the decathlon gold medal winner in 1960. He was one of the people grabbed it, and he was the one who actually grabbed his hand. And he said that Sirhan, who's a tiny little man, I've been to meet him and visit him in prison. He said the tiniest little guy. But Rayford said he had superhuman strength, and he could not get that gun out of his hand. And Sirhan now was pointing the gun away from my father and fired 6 more shots. So there's 8 shots in the barrel. He fired 6 in the other direction, the opposite direction from where my father was. All of those shots hit people. So we know who they hit. We know what happened to all of those bullets. One person got shot twice, once through his once through his clothing. And my father was shot 4 times from behind. And
so it's the same scenario as Oswald.
Well, let me just finish.
A patsy and a real shooter.
Right. So he was a distractor. And the real shooter was behind my father. He was a man called Eugene Thane Cesar, who was a security guard who worked for Lockheed. He was a CIA operative. He was a vocal racist who hated the Kennedys. And he had been the one who led my father through the kitchen toward the ambush. He was holding my father's arm. He drew his gun.
Right.
And my father was shot 4 times from behind. One of the shots passed through the shoulder pad of his, harmlessly through the shoulder pad of his coat. The other 2 were into his back, and then one behind his ear, which was the fatal shot. And all of the shots had an uphill trajectory. So, and all of them, and this is what the autopsy found, were contact shots. So the barrel of the gun was touching my father's body or his clothing, and they left the discharge left carbon tattoos or less than an inch from his skin. So they left carbon tattoos on his flesh. And the autopsy was an exquisite autopsy. It's called the perfect autopsy. Thomas Noguchi, who knew what had happened in President Kennedy's autopsy, which was, loaded with scandal, did not want the same thing to happen in LA. And he said, we're not going to do Dallas again. So he flew in the top coroners from all of the armed services, the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, to observe what he was doing. And his autopsy is called the perfect autopsy in the medical literature. And, he concluded that the shots had come from behind. And there were 77 eyewitnesses who saw that Sirhan was never behind my father. He was always in front of him, always about 5 feet away. And all the shots that killed him now.
It seems so open.
He fell, and as my father fell, he must have known he was being shot from behind because he turned around and grabbed off Cesar's clip-on tie. And you can see pictures of him lying on the floor, and he's actually lying on top of Cesar with the clip-on tie in his hand. And there's pictures of Cesar without his tie on. Cesar pushed my father off him and stood up. He was knocked down when my father fell onto him. He stood up and was seen with his gun. The police did not confiscate the gun that night, and they asked him what he was doing, and he said he drew the gun to shoot at Sirhan. And
there you have it right there. Robert Kennedy was not killed by Sirhan. He was shot from behind from a guy. Let's see get that guy's name again.
He was a vocal racist. He was a CIA operative. Who worked for Lockheed. Eugene Dan Cesar.
Eugene Dan Cesar, I just believe his name. Yeah, Eugene Dan Cesar, who was a CIA operative. That's who shot Robert Kennedy. So it wasn't Sirhan, as most of these documentaries and most of these mainstream media keeps telling everyone it was Eugene Dan Cesar, a CIA operative, killed Robert Kennedy. So it's very obvious why they killed the Kennedys or why they're going after the Kennedys. It's been alleged for a long time that the Kennedys were assassinated. Well, it's obviously about John F. Kennedy, who's sparked so many conspiracy theories as the media labels them, but it means very clear over time who killed John F. Kennedy and who killed his brother. And also the real reason why Robert Kennedy was killed is because he was about to open his own independent investigation into his brother's death if he became president of the United States, because he won the nomination to become the Democratic ran president. The run for president. I mean, he won the nomination to run from the Democratic side, and then all of a sudden he was shot and killed from a small gathering at a hotel by originally they said it was Sirhan, but Eugene Dan Cesar, who was the real shooter, and it was crazy to find out that he was a CIA operative. So the CIA had a plot to play in both the Kennedy's deaths. It's insane.
Several others in the vicinity were also injured. Sirhan harbored deep-seated anger and resentment toward Kennedy. He was particularly incensed by Kennedy's pro-Israel stance and support for the U.S. decision to send military aid to Israel. Sirhan felt personally and politically compelled to act against Kennedy.
It was also implied that Sirhan was under a sort of MK Ultra-like mind control. So he was not in his right stable of mind when he shot RFK. let me take that back. When he tried to shoot RFK, he was not in his mind. He was just put up and prompted to be a distraction, while the real shooter will let off the real shots and get himself caught, of course. And of course, the CIA still face no type of real consequences, quite frankly, for having involvement in both the Kennedy's deaths. Even though, to me, they were not the main leading factors into his death, because again, we have multiple parts to play in the Kennedy's deaths, but a certain foreign nation that we give a lot of money to had a major role to play in the murder of John F. Kennedy, and also RFK too as well, along with the mafia, who also had a part to play into it for personal reasons. The CIA is just one of the many ones that attach themselves to this to basically get rid of both the Kennedys. And it's a shame what happened to RFK, that he does not really talk about this much, honestly speaking, and then he just sides with the same people that are basically under the control of the same foreign nation that we've give so much money to, that starts every war, and then we have to come in and clean up all their bullshit. So it's a shame that how much of a sellout he's become.
Sirhan was convicted of the murder of Robert F. Kennedy and sentenced to death in April 1969. However, in 1972, his sentence was commuted to life imprisonment after the California Supreme Court invalidated the state's death penalty laws.
With the assassination of Robert Kennedy in June 1968, there's a really interesting and important what-if question to consider in American politics. In the previous third of a century, let's say back to 1932, there'd basically been a liberal consensus in American politics. Franklin Roosevelt's election as president in 1932 created a period of Democratic Party dominance after a long period of Republican Party dominance, and creates a liberal consensus in America where most Americans are in favor of an activist federal government which tries to, bring about prosperity but also social justice. In all of that period from 32 onwards, there'd only been one Republican president, and that was Dwight Eisenhower, who was largely elected because he was a military hero. 1968 is a turning point in American political history, because in 1968, Richard Nixon, a Republican, is elected president. The argument can be made that had Robert Kennedy not been assassinated, could he have won the 1968 election? I think that the tough thing would have been winning the Democratic nomination, but I think had he got it, he really would have had a very good chance against Nixon. He had all of that Kennedy glamour, Kennedy mystique, and in terms of the popular vote, Nixon's victory over Humphrey was close. So I think there's a really great likelihood that had he got the Democratic nomination, he would have won the presidency. It's interesting to consider that. To what extent did the assassination of Robert Kennedy affect the longer-term trajectory of American political history? Would the shift to the right, the shift to a more conservative brand of politics that dominated America for the next quarter of the century, would that have been different had Robert Kennedy not been assassinated in June 1968?
Kennedy's death led to an outpouring of grief and mourning. His funeral was held at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, and he was buried at Arlington National Cemetery near his brother. Kennedy's assassination significantly impacted the 1968 presidential race. Many believe that had he lived, he might have secured the Democratic nomination and potentially won the presidency. Media coverage of political assassinations profoundly influences public perception and political discourse. The way these events are reported can shape narratives, sway public opinion, and affect political landscapes. Media coverage can influence public demand for policy responses, such as increased security measures, gun control laws, or new legislation addressing underlying issues. The assassination of Robert F. Kennedy contributed to the passage of the Gun Control Act of 1968. Being a martyr involves profound commitment to one's beliefs, often resulting in sacrifice and suffering. Martyrdom is a concept that transcends individual actions, becoming symbolic of larger movements, causes, or ideals. It represents the ultimate expression of dedication, courage, and conviction in the face of adversity or persecution.
With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee. The assassination of this prominent civil rights leader had profound impacts on the United States and the civil rights movement.
I do plan to stir up trouble in some of the big cities in our country this summer. But my stirring up trouble will be righteous trouble to bring about nonviolent solutions. There is no doubt about the despair in the Negro community, and I don't think we deal with that despair by doing nothing. We've got to have outlets in which people can channelize their legitimate discontent.
In the early evening, King was standing on the balcony outside his room, room 306, at the Lorraine Motel. He was preparing to leave for dinner with colleagues. At approximately 6:01 p.m., a single bullet struck King. The shot was fired from a rooming house across the street from the motel. The bullet entered through his right cheek, traveled through his neck, and lodged in his shoulder. Despite emergency surgery, King was pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. He was 39 years old.
I was deeply saddened last evening as all
King, I didn't really really rock with King that much because I mean it's well known that King was in cahoots with a lot of at the time no one did notice, but I mean as time gone on we've got more information that King was rocking a lot of communist Jewish people who work with him a lot on his going around giving out his speeches and stuff. And then it was a prominent communist Jew, I can't think of his name off the top of my head right now, who wrote his I Have a Dream speech. King pushed a lot of egalitarianism and stuff like that. This is where the contrast difference between Malcolm X and King was very prominent. You know, it's crazy how Malcolm X doesn't have a day, but Martin Luther King did. And many people can constitute that King, you know, civil rights led to the Civil Rights Act being passed and stuff like that because of his death. Yeah. You know, regardless of whatever, but Malcolm X wanted real, like, blacks to stay segregated and to rely on each other. To basically turn blacks into what they should have been instead of what they are today. Well-spoken, well-dressed, you know, well-educated for the most part. And King was like just pushing, well, I'll just be very blunt, communism. He was a race hustler. So then what the facade he put on, he was having a lot of sex orgy parties behind scenes. And one of his prominent buddies, came out of the FBI files that was released recently, that one of his buddies raped for YouTube purposes a woman that was at one of these parties. So they tried to cover it up, of course, but I mean the FBI had these files on him and stuff. But of course nothing came about because King was assassinated. So
men of goodwill must have been by the senseless slaying of Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a symbol of nonviolence, and I hope and pray that his end would in some way bring people together so that we could solve the many serious problems of human relations that face us in this country of ours today in a nonviolent manner.
The death of Martin Luther King is a great tragedy, not only for people of the United States, but for all of us throughout the world. I couldn't foretell what the result will be, but we've lost a very wise counselor and a very constructive figure, a very constructive statesman.
I said, Dr. King. That was it. I said, Dr. King, just as he straightened up. I said, Dr. King. And the bullet exploded in his face. And evidently it came from this direction because he was standing at an acute angle, and the bullet knocked him up off of his feet in that direction against that ledge over there. And it knocked him off of his feet. Yeah. And we turned around immediately because we didn't know how many bullets were coming. And when we turned around looking, and we were looking to see where it come from because you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell it was a shot. You didn't get a shot? No, until it hit his face. It sounded like a stick of dynamite, a large firecracker.
News of Ray's arrest came first from the FBI chief Edgar Hoover in Washington. He said that Ray was carrying 2 Canadian passports and a fully loaded pistol when he landed at London from Lisbon.
The shooter was found to be James Earl Ray, who was apprehended and sentenced to 99 years in prison. King's assassination led to a wave of riots and civil unrest across more than 100 cities in the United States. This period of turmoil is often referred to as the Holy Week Uprising, partly in response to King's assassination and the ensuing civil unrest.
Yeah, that was kind of a stupid thing to do, just to go out there, just burn down public properties and stuff like that. That's not a smart thing to do afterwards. This is almost similar to what BLM did for George Floyd, who was not an activist, was not a politician, was not a political commentator, was just really just like a meth head, an active fentanyl user who died of a fentanyl overdose. You know, was it 3 times the amount that a person shouldn't have been able to walk around with? Even to this day, people say that he still died from that knee on the neck. When you realize, you look back at the photo and then you look back at the video, first off, the knee was on his back, and then you already said he couldn't breathe even before he was put on the ground. So burning down buildings and stuff like that it's not the right pathway to anything, really. It doesn't do nobody nothing. Being civil, being diplomatic would have been the right way to go instead of just burning down buildings. My personal perspective. But really, that is the form of diplomacy in the right way done. If you're just burning down and destroying American property, you're just costing the taxpayer dollars more money to fix all that up, to fix it all and repair it all back to how it was before, and you're just costing people more money. So it doesn't do anybody justice at all.
President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, also known as the Fair Housing Act. This act prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing. King's legacy continues to influence civil rights movements globally. his philosophy of nonviolence and his fight for racial equality remain central to discussions on civil rights and social justice.
The life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. find meaning in the words of a black slave preacher that he quoted many times. We ain't what we ought to be. We ain't what we want to be. We ain't what we're going to be. But thank God we ain't what we was.
Little was the name of the man who formerly owned my grandfather as a slave, so I gave it back. In America, I don't think there's any gradual coming together. There may be a gradual coming together at the top. A few hand-picked, upper-crust, bourgeois Negroes are coming together with the so-called liberal element in the white community. But at the mass level, I don't think there's any real, honest, sincere coming together. If there's anything, there's a widening of the gap. A dark page in the annals of America has been written to the crack of an assassin's bullet. A nation mourns, the world grieves. The man who became 35th president less than 3 years ago is dead.
The assassination of John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, is one of the most scrutinized and significant moments in American history. President Kennedy was in Texas to mend political fences among the state's Democratic Party and to lay the groundwork for his 1964 re-election campaign.
The events and decisions of the next 10 months may well decide the fate of man for the next 10,000 years. There will be no avoiding these events. There will be no appeal.
A motorcade through downtown Dallas was part of his visit, intended to allow him to be seen by as many people as possible. The motorcade route took Kennedy through Dealey Plaza, a public park in downtown Dallas. The motorcade passed the Texas School Book Depository, a key location in the assassination. A civilian bystander, Mr. Abraham Zapruder, filmed the motorcade with an 8mm home movie camera. The assassination took place shortly after 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. It was recorded that the first shot likely missed the motorcade entirely. The second shot struck President Kennedy in the upper back, exited through his throat, and hit Texas Governor John Connally, who was seated in front of Kennedy. The third and fatal shot struck Kennedy in the head, causing massive trauma.
A man is captured after he is reported to have killed a policeman. That man is a 24-year-old pro-Castro Texan who once sought Soviet citizenship. He is charged with murder. Meanwhile, the president had been rushed to a nearby hospital where life lingered as a waiting world prayed. A half hour later, he was dead, his life crushed like his wife's abandoned bouquet. A shocked nation weeps.
Like I mentioned earlier about his death, was a
The shooter was widely
very
accepted to be
big
Lee Harvey
major
Oswald,
turning point
who was
in
confirmed
America.
as a lone marksman in the Warren Commission, a report established by President Lyndon B. Johnson. Conspiracies have since risen, many stating that there were multiple gunmen on account of the doctors who tried to save Kennedy's life in Parkland's hospital, who stated they confirmed an entrance wound on JFK's body, which did not match the direction of Oswald's location.
The assassin's aim is deadly.
Nor did it match Oswald as a shooter because of contradictory eyewitnesses about where he was at during the day of the assassination. You know, one day I'm gonna go over John F. Kennedy and everything that's been said and everything that's been presented about his death and everything that surrounds it and all the evidence pointing towards you know that multiple shooter and who the real ringleader of this band of shooters were. You know, it's very surprising who it is. I mean, it's very obvious, clear as day who it was that killed Kennedy because he was right there next to Kennedy when all this was going down, and he pretty much executed the final shot that pretty much put Kennedy away for good.
In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded that Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy, although specifics were not determined. The event left a lasting impression on American consciousness, contributing to the rise of conspiracy theories and skepticism towards the government.
If you look at John Kennedy at the time that he's assassinated in downtown Dallas on the 22nd of November 1963, and you compare that to the John Kennedy who's inaugurated as president on that freezing cold day on the 20th of January 1961, he's a very different sort of political leader. So in terms of foreign policy, I think the Cuban Missile Crisis is an educative experience for him. It really changes him. He becomes much more conscious of and concerned about the dangers of the nuclear age.
Oswald walks his last mile. His assailant moves in from the right.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Oswald has been shot.
Now, from another camera, the motion is slowed. The murderer moves in, and here is the shame of all America as Jack Rubenstein takes the law unto himself.
Ruby claimed he acted out of anger and sorrow for Kennedy's widow and family.
Mrs. Kennedy begins the long hours of her public grief with the courageous dignity that has marked each moment of her ordeal.
And that's not what was said, actually.
Caroline and John seem to mirror their mother's poise.
Kennedy's assassination is often seen as a pivotal moment that accelerated the civil rights movement, with his successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, pushing through landmark civil rights legislation.
President Johnson represents a sorrowing people as he places a wreath marked "From President Johnson and the Nation."
At the start of his presidency, he's got pretty hardline views on foreign policy. So you have his attempt to overthrow Castro at the Bay of Pigs. So he launches the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. During the final year of the presidency of Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1960, secret planning within the CIA for an overthrow of Castro was underway. And the basic idea of the plan was to use Cuban emigres, so Cubans who'd been unhappy with Castro, had fled Castro's Cuba for the US, and in particular Florida, take them, train them, equip them, and send them back into Cuba to stage a coup d'etat to overthrow Castro. Kennedy is briefed about this operation during the 1960 campaign, and when he becomes president, that's the first decision, big decision he has to make, is whether to give the go-ahead for an invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs.
Held approximately 2 years off. Havana's ovation for Fidel Castro himself had been long deferred. He's seen show his triumphal march across the island.
The CIA definitely was involved. I mentioned that earlier when I talked about his brother, R.F. Kennedy, when he was assassinated by the CIA as well. So they had a part to play in it too as well. And then plus, you know, because they had like a contentious relationship because of, you know, the CIA was pro-killing Fidel Castro. Kennedy was kind of like putting a rock between a hard place when it came to wanting to execute the operation to kill Fidel Castro. So you can kind of see, you can kind of pretty much see the background right there about like why they had such a contentious relationship already. Besides just a bunch of other things. A bunch of other things that the CIA has done behind presidents of the United States' backs to better serve the American people according to the CIA's point of view by doing illegal activities to ensure that American and democracy is procured. So one day I'm gonna give you guys a deep dive into the CIA and give a deep dive into like their ideology about what is it, what is their driving force. Because, you know, as y'all know about neocons, you know, they're in bed with the CIA for the most part. They're encouraged the CIA to go out there and execute a lot of these secret operations to ensure America is procured, democracy is ensured, and we go to other countries and we spread our democracy and Americanism to other countries, and so that way they can better suit the insurance and the growing power of America. In a broader perspective, I'm not against that, but for the neocons, their entire motive is not for America. Mostly, it's mostly in favor of a certain foreign country. That's my problem with their whole ideologies, to better serve a foreign country that I've mentioned already before, that is in charge of our politics. That's basically who the neocons who are in favor of all these regime change like operations that go on in all these other foreign countries. That's why they are in favor of the CIA to execute these operations most times, because it's not just for America, it's for, you know, a country with the Star of David on its flag.
In his lifetime, the bearded cigar-smoking idealist has become a legend. For most Cubans, this is the first glimpse of the man whose name became a byword months of guerrilla fighting. Eddie had no clear idea of his beliefs or his program, but knew only of his cause and his personal dedication. Now his words strike terrific enthusiasm. With military victory, Fidel's of popular support, built in a matter of days by this hero's procession.
There's a conversation he had with the New York Times journalist later in 1961. And the New York Times journalist scribbled down notes in his journal at the time. He said, I had a conversation with JFK. JFK said that he was under terrific pressure from intelligence people to okay a Castro murder.
Fidel Castro, the Cuban leader, reportedly survived over 600 assassination attempts, many orchestrated by the CIA and anti-Castro groups. Some of the methods used to kill the leader ranged from a poisoned scuba diving suit to an
I think that's the world record for surviving that many assassinations. I think Fidel Castro has that, because like to survive 600 assassination attempts is insane. I don't think anyone else has beaten that number since then.
Exploding cigar. Castro's survival contributed to his legendary status and the strained relations between the United States and Cuba during the Cold War. The methods and motivations behind political assassinations differ markedly between democracies and authoritarian regimes, shaped by the respective political landscapes, levels of control, and the intended messages to both domestic and international audiences.
Oh shit.
Nathuram Godse, a former member of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and a member of the Hindu Mahasabha, believed that eliminating Gandhi would protect Hindu interests and preserve what he considered the rightful Hindu dominance in India. But an idea is something which is not so easily killed.
The cause of the First World War that everyone points to is the assassination of Franz Ferdinand by a Serbian nationalist called Gavrilo Princip. Why does the assassination of an archduke in Sarajevo necessarily result in people, shelling each other in northern France just a few months later? What connects the dots is a series of treaties that have been signed over the past several years by lots and lots of different countries in Europe and elsewhere that promise each other that they'll back them if they're attacked by someone else. The problem about potential chain reactions and thinking you might not start them is what happens when you do start a chain reaction. What happens when, as a result of the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Austria-Hungary decides to declare war on Serbia because they're blaming the Serbs for the assassination.
Austria-Hungary saw this as an opportunity to assert its dominance over Serbia and curb Serbian nationalism. The conflict quickly expanded beyond Europe, due to the various colonial possessions and global interests of the major powers. The alliances and treaties dragged more countries into making a truly global war. Political assassinations and attempted assassinations are potent acts that have repeatedly altered the course of history. The acts date back centuries. They serve as stark reminders of the vulnerabilities inherent in political systems and the profound impact that individual acts of violence can have on society.
This is a very good documentary right here. I like this one.
The attempted assassination of candidate Trump does in fact affect how the world sees the U.S. There is some concern, rightly, about gun ownership in the U.S.
President Trump is making not just a comeback, but a reassessment of the world and the things that have happened to him.
When Ronald Reagan was shot, he got a 22-point bounce in his polling numbers post the shooting. So I think it changes the game. It really puts the Biden campaign in a very, very tough position.
President Joe Biden has just announced that he is dropping out of the 2024 presidential race.
He also thanks Vice President Kamala Harris for, quote, being an extraordinary partner in all of this work.
I believe, and I think many others saw, that the split second was intervention from God.
Thanking God that it wasn't worse than it could have been. Another inch or so and he'd be dead.
He's shown clearly after the assassination attempt, he's got the...
all these interviews were conducted around the RNC. So this definitely was during Trump's campaign up until his 2024 re-election as president.
The heart of a lion. He's got incredible courage and fortitude.
And for him to get right back up, he really did show his strength, his character.
It means literally he dodged a bullet. It means literally that he is alive and ready with new vigor to address the issues for the world.
The attempted assassination of Donald Trump was seen by many to be a conspiracy, with recordings of the Secret Service being notified of the shooter's location prior to the incident.
Look, they're all pointing. Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look, there he is right there. Right there, see?
Yeah, it was real known for a minute that they actually had intel that he was up there before the shot was fired off. And yet no one did anything to try to quell him before the shot could be let off to even graze Trump's ear. It's insane to me. The inconsistencies, the lack of explanation about why, it's not doing no justice to this assassination plot to kill Trump. And then it's been said that he's hired by the Iranians to kill him. There was no proof of that ever being the case, even still to this day. So I don't think we ever will get transparency about Thomas Crooks. And to me, I believe he's just a far leftist who's just hated Trump to the point where he wanted to take a shot off at him. And of course he failed.
Yep. He's laying down. See him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
We have people that
Video obtained by ABC station WTAE appearing to show the alleged gunman Thomas Crooks walking the perimeter of the rally about 1 hour before the former president was shot. And the Secret Service saw him on that roof a full 20 minutes before he fired at the former president.
One can only wonder if events such as this occur due to a lapse in judgment, or whether something darker is afoot.
One of the concerns on the back of the attempted assassination is the degree to which the American democracy and the democratic process during our elections can be protected. Now, whether the Secret Service or FBI did the job they were meant to do is another concern and another issue.
The Secret Service does have a problem. They did have a problem and still do. And that is why on Monday in Washington, we will begin the hearings to not just determine what went wrong, but what it's going to take to fix this. When a person can get within 130 yards with a sniper rifle with the President of the United States and then point fingers at not knowing who is responsible, is irresponsible for the Secret Service.
The attempted assassination has done nothing to quieten the venomous tone of American politics. The billboards down the road from the showground now celebrating his survival and fueling the sense that Donald Trump is America's savior.
We will make America safe again.
Perhaps we need a bit more legislation around gun control, which is certainly something that former President Obama attempted and is perhaps going to come back on the agenda.
Understanding these events within their historical context reveals the complex interplay between power, ideology, and human action, offering valuable lessons on the importance of political stability, security, and the rule of law in preserving democratic societies. Through the lens of notable historical examples, we see how political assassinations have not only changed immediate political landscapes, but also left enduring legacies that continue to shape contemporary societal and political structures.
Great documentary right there. So, again, like I mentioned earlier, now I've told you guys earlier how data is collected or how what they describe as right-leaning crimes and left-leaning crimes. So we're gonna go and dissect how the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, is able to pin their data in what they constitute as like right-wing terrorism or right-wing white supremacy like terrorism crimes. This is from American Renaissance from J.R. Taylor.
The ADL has become such a cuckoo organization that you wonder why anyone pays it any attention. But just this week, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk killing, NBC posted some of the ADL's so-called data. Look at this. Right-wing ideologies have fueled more than 70% of all extremist attacks and domestic terror plots since 2002 in the U.S. And look at that big blue bar at the top. White supremacists are on the rampage. So don't worry about Charlie Kirk's killer or attempts to murder the president. The problem, always and everywhere, is white supremacy. How does the ADL get these silly numbers? Every year, it puts out a report called Murder and Extremism to tell you how awful white people were the previous year. Here is this year's report about last year's awful white people. Most of the 2024 extremist-related murders were committed by whites.
This is them giving up their data of their collection of like crimes that based off of like based off their findings, like they said, like white supremacy is like 62%. You know, anti-government extremism, sovereign citizen, 23%, anti-government extremism, other 15%. Yeah, but Jared Taylor's going to explain to you why that's an inflated number and how they're able to get this inflated numbers.
Supremacists. And you would assume that all the other killers were white too. Only 13 deaths, which must have been a disappointment for the ADL, but not a single Islamic or left-wing killing. What were all these white supremacist murders you never heard about? Career criminal Jesse James Sullivan was out of the big house on parole. He killed his half-brother because he thought the brother had snitched about another crime. The ADL says that the killer was in a white prison gang. Don McDougal, who had a record of child enticement, killed this 11-year-old girl. The ADL says he has 2 swastika tattoos and has ties to a white prison gang. Aaron Salter, a criminal on the lam, beat a man to death with a metal baseball bat after telling him, "Stay out of my yard." The ADL says he was affiliated with a white supremacist prison gang. Zachary Babitz had been out of the pen just a few months when he killed a man and stole his Jeep. ADL says he has a 1488 tattoo and had just joined the Asatru Folk Assembly, which it calls white supremacist. Darren Abbey killed a man camping in a tent and stole his guns. He reportedly has a swastika tattoo. I can't find a photo for Timothy Cole.
Yeah, you're starting to see the pattern right now. This is what they constitute as right-wing extremism, and most of these guys are like they're like criminals, like people that were in prison, that were in jail, and they're constituting them as right-wing white supremacist groups. Even though in reality, these guys can't even vote, and they join a white gang in prison, and you constitute that as like a right-leaning white supremacist group. That's how they're able to add to the data of like white supremacy extremism. It seemed like to me just like they're pushing like anti-white rhetoric more, and they're not really like doing the data justice by actually being consistent with the data in the right way, and they're just pushing like narratives and twisting it to make it sound like these guys are white supremacists, where in reality they're just committing They're just criminals. So, in my opinion, criminality could be considered left leaning most times because most of these guys don't have political ties to any organization besides them just being in a white prison gang, which that happens all the time in prison. So,
but he tried to set fire to a relative's house as part of a custody battle. When the cops came, he drove off at 90 miles an hour and crashed into this white BMW. A passenger in it died. ADL says he is a white supremacist gang member. Nicholas Umfenauer was an ex-con who was out of prison. He decided to help a prison buddy in a jailbreak. Skylar Meade was being returned to prison after a hospital visit, and Umfenauer killed a police officer in an ambush to spring his pal. ADL says they were in a white supremacist prison gang. That's it for white supremacists. Now, you thought all their victims were going to be innocent BIPOCs, but you were wrong. Most of these men were in white prison gangs, which they often joined just to protect themselves from Hispanic and black gangs. These 5 people killed 2 women over a custody dispute. They were reportedly part of an anti-government group that called itself God's Misfits. This makes it right-wing extremist murder. Justin Moan thought the government had betrayed the people. His father was a federal employee and resisted when his son tried to arrest him. Justin shot him and cut off his head. More right-wing extremism. Julie Sulpicio set up a police ambush in which an officer was killed. She is so deranged, she's been twice found not competent to stand trial, but she had anti-government propaganda in her house, which makes her a far-right extremist murderer.
It just seems like to me that's the type of like dishonestness the ADL are. They're fools. Like they this is how they trick the public, and this is how like a lot of left political commentators get their data from. They get their data from the ADL, the SPLC, Right Wing Watch, these types of like private organizations that sit here and misconstrue a lot of data to fit the narrative that right-wing extremism or white supremacy is the biggest leading cause of political violence in America. In reality, it's not. I'm surprised people even still use the ADL. I'm surprised they still do. And the FBI just announced a couple of weeks ago they're going to stop working with the ADL for the time being, I believe, but they didn't announce that they were going to use the SPLC, who I'm just not a big fan of. But anyways, yeah. So I'm surprised the ADL, it took them this long for the FBI to announce that they're going to stop working with the surprised it took the FBI long to announce that they stopped working with the ADL, because it's been clear for a long time that how dishonest they've been about their data.
You see the pattern. The ADL finds any killing for any reason by anyone it can remotely call a white supremacist or right-wing loony, and then that's extremist terrorist murder. I guess there wasn't a single Antifa who killed his ex-girlfriend, not one MS-13 thug who killed a rival, and no hopped-up Muslim who killed anyone.
Yeah.
But there is one genuine political killing in this report. This black guy, Corey Cobb Bay, is a self-styled sovereign citizen and member of the Moorish Science Temple who hates the government. He walked up to a stranger, Officer Darren Burks, and shot him dead.
Yeah, that one was kind of crazy. Yeah, that one was like, bro, that's kind of crazy. Let me skip ahead a little bit.
Terrorist murder, killing strangers for a political reason. And the only case the ADL could find was a black man killing another black man, but it forgot to tell you that they were black.
Yeah.
The other stuff, killing someone over a custody battle, that's just plain old crime, for heaven's sake. And the ADL left out Luigi Mangione, who killed the CEO of United Healthcare because Mangione hated insurance companies. It left out Natalie Rupnow, who shot up the Abundant Life Christian School in Madison, Wisconsin, killing 3 people and wounding 6 more. This is how the ADL gets these scary numbers.
The fact that they left out that school shooting and Luigi Mangione just goes to show you, like, bro, these people are literally just not serious about their jobs at all, and they just literally just want to push their own. Like Jonathan Greenblatt, the the CEO, the head of the ADL, he literally he's just I would describe him more of a racist than anybody. Jonathan Greenblatt just literally is that much of a despicable human being. Like the ADL has ruined so many people's lives, has gone after so many people to try to frame them as anti-Semitic or whatever. Like, bro, the ADL is just a trash organization that needs to be put out of business for good. And I'm surprised it's still going on even to this day. So that's all the ADL is just dishonest, a bunch of fucking dishonest cretins.
But white supremacist terror and extremism. If a white guy with a swastika tattoo kills his wife, that's terrorism. This report is junk. Anyone who cites it is stupid or thinks you're stupid. I can't wait for the report on 2025. On the very first day of the year, a single Muslim killed more innocents than all the victims the ADL could dredge up for all of 2024. Shamsuddin Jabbar flew an ISIS flag from his truck and plowed through a New Year's crowd on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. 15 dead, 50 injured. There was the Charlie Kirk assassination, 3 lethal attacks on ICE facilities. And how about transsexual Robin Westman, who murdered 2 children?
Yeah, I covered that one too on the channel if you want to watch that one.
And wounded 17 other people at the Annunciation Catholic Church in Minneapolis. Will the ADL bring itself to admit, as the Atlantic did this week, that left-wing terrorism is on the rise? Or will it insult?
Yeah, I have that article right here that goes over left-wing terrorism is on the rise. For the first time in more than 30 years, attacks by the far left outnumbered by those by the far right. No matter how hard ideologies try to exclusively blame their political foes for acts of political violence, the truth is that violent extremists today emerge from across the political spectrum. We have studied this problem and believe that our data can help illuminate an issue too often defined by partisan finger pointing. As part of a study to publish this week by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, we compiled and analyzed a data set of 750 attacks and plots in the United States from January 1st, 1994 to July 4th, 2025. Our research focuses only on instances of terrorism, which we define as attacks and plots by a non-stop actor attempted to achieve a political end and assert a psychological influence on a broad population. Among other details, the data set includes the types of weapons used, the intended targets, the number of fatalities, and the ideology of perpetrators. We have found that left-wing terrorism has increased since President Donald Trump's rise to political prominence in 2016. Indeed, 2025 marks the first time in more than 30 years that left-wing attacks outnumber those from the far right. There you go. That goes to show you right there exactly how much the dynamic has changed over the years, even though some of the data is so inflammatory. Just goes to show you that, yeah, left-wing terrorism, which it's always been a problem. They just don't count none of the times that Antifa has gone out there and committed acts of terrorism. They consider Charlottesville to be a right-leaning crime, but in reality, Antifa showed up there and started the problems with the far right before the far right was there to start the problems with them. And you could read many stories and listen to many accounts that day that tell you exactly what happened.
Us with more phony white supremacist trash. What it ought to do is close its doors. Jonathan Greenblatt runs the organization that puts out this worthless report. In 2022, he wrote an article called Getting It Right in Defining Racism, in which he confessed he doesn't know how to define it.
Yeah, that's crazy. Let me show you guys right here. So this is from the unsreview.com. All right, so let me scroll down right here. Yeah. So as you can see right here, we are going to open ourselves to comments on our new definition of racism from the public. And as you can scroll right here, this is a picture from the article. We are going to open ourselves to comments on racism, as I just read. The Anti-Defamation League has been fighting what it claimed was racism for 109 years. But this dope, whose annual salary is more than $1,200,000. Isn't even sure what it is. Yo. He's getting paid this much money, and this guy doesn't even understand what constitutes as like racism. So he just says that any form of like a white crime goes towards a white supremacy type crime or a right wing extremism crime. That's just kind of insane to me.
We are going to open ourselves to comments on our new definition of racism from the public. The Anti-Defamation League has been fighting what it claimed was racism for 109 years. But this dope, whose annual salary is more than $1,200,000, isn't even sure what it is. Give up, fellas. You spend over $100 million a year on 550 employees to make fools of yourselves. And you turn your own name upside down and defame other people for a living. Pretty soon, even NBC will be laughing at you.
Yeah, and there you have it. That's exactly what. So, as we're going over today, we're going over exactly how the data is collected for these types of reports that are pushed out by people like the ADL, to give you a perspective on what constitutes as like right-wing terrorism, white supremacy like terrorism. Then we also talked about left-leaning, what constitutes as left-leaning terrorism. Even though basically, if you look at like what constitutes as left-leaning terrorism and also right-leaning terrorism, most of what was described for each one can let me slow down a little bit. It can constitute as both of each one. Like incel related violence, that's not a right leaning issue, because technically speaking, if the guy's a left leaning incel, then he could be considered left. But if you're telling me incel related crimes that pertain to like misogyny, they all have to be right leaning because it's against a woman, that doesn't make any sense at all. But that's how the data is misconstrued to give a narrative to where it seems like right-wing extremism for a long time has been the forefront of like extreme violence, even though technically it's not, because a lot of times, like a lot of these reports do not count the times that Antifa has been out there and committed acts of terrorism, but they don't count it as such to the data at all. So we watched the documentary. We read some couple of articles, and yeah, we pretty much just covered every ground there is to cover about how bad political violence has gotten over time, and hopefully it's gonna get better. But with all these ICE raids going on right now, it seems like we got more chance for more riots, more protests, more attacks on ICE agents, more attacks on like their families, of course, too, as well, because we have a bunch of insane groups, communist, socialist, anarchist, that are going out here and just want to perpetrate violence on people that they just disagree with, or the fact that we're enforcing laws and just think that's a form of Nazism or fascism, when in reality that's just enforcing your laws. So it's a W show tonight. We pretty much covered everything we need to cover right now. So I'm about to upload this. It's gonna drop tonight at 8 p.m. I hope you guys enjoy it. Gonna try to shoot tonight's next episode tomorrow. I'm gonna react to the Tucker Carlson interview with Nick Fuentes, and I'm gonna get the post reaction afterwards, where there was a debate hosted on Piers Morgan's show between Dave Smith and Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee about the reaction to the interview, and if Tucker should have pushed back on Nick, where in reality it's an interview. So they still didn't agree on everything or whatever, but it's an interview. But anyways, I want to thank you guys for joining me for today's show, and I hope you have a good rest of your Saturday. I'm gonna enjoy mine right now. I'm hungry, get something to eat, then I have some places to be. But I want to thank you guys for joining me right now. Make sure you smash the like button, leave a comment. See you guys basically tomorrow. So have a good rest of your day.